Information only. We will not take any votes. And we will not discuss anything substantive. So with that said, in a very informal manner, let's see, can Haral or Silva, do you mind discussing the 25 year-end budget update in a informal way?
Sure.
Take off your ball gowns, tuxedos go away, you know.
Okay. Sorry for all this confusion. So let's get started. Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Haral Gandhi. I am the Director of Finance and Operations. I am joined today by our accountant, Silva Ivazian. Since we had scheduling conflicts back in August and had to cancel our last meeting, today's presentation will cover both how we closed SFY25 and where things stand after the first quarter of SFY 2026. I'll start with our SFY 25 year-end results and then turn it over to Silva for the SFY 26 quarter one update. Next slide, please. Let's start by looking at how we closed out SFY 25 from a financial perspective, including our year-end results, the major drivers behind them, and what this means for our overall financial health. As a reminder, our operating budget runs on a state fiscal year, which is from July 1st to June 30th. Next slide, please. This table shows our approved budget for SFY 25, our projected revenue and expenses by quarter, and our actual results at year end. On the revenue side, we budgeted approximately $8.87 million, and we closed the year at roughly $8.23 million. On the expenses side, we also budgeted $8.87 million, and our actual spending came in at about $8.2 million. We closed the year with a modest surplus of just under $36,000, meaning our revenue slightly exceeded our expenses. Ending with a surplus is a positive outcome, and if it shows we're on track toward our goal of a balanced budget where revenue and expenses align. Our overhead rate came in very close to the approved rate at 119.6% versus 120.3%. Through close monitoring of revenue throughout the year and adjusting expenses as needed, we kept the variance small and stayed on track. Next slide, please. A number of key initiatives and cost drivers influenced our budget performance in SFY 25. First, staffing. We began the year with 52 permanent full-time positions and ended with 57. We hired 10 new staff members and had 5 resignations throughout the year. Recruitment costs came in below projections. We expected to rely on hiring firm to help with the highly technical positions, but we ultimately completed our hiring without using their services. We successfully launched 2 new discretionary grants, both of which required external consultants and new workflows. On the Vision Zero front, we completed the action plan and secured an extension through SFY 26, allowing this work to continue at both the federal and state levels. Professional development was another key area of investment. We invested in staff growth through roughly 15 conferences this year, several of which included presentations of our team's work. We also completed agency-wide trainings such as DEIA and project management programs. And lastly, office space. One of the largest uncertainties this year was the potential office move or lease renegotiation. We budgeted for higher costs in case a move occurred, but since we weren't able to secure a new lease or identify a new space, our actual costs ended up lower than projected. Together, these initiatives, combined with careful expense management, allowed us to keep our budget on track while supporting major projects and staff development. Next slide, please. So this chart illustrates our net position over the last 5 years. The net position is essentially a measure of our overall financial health. It reflects the difference between our assets and liabilities at year end. Because we operate on reimbursable grants, keeping this number stable is especially important. If our net position becomes too positive, meaning we've collected more than what we've spent, we may be required to return funds to our grantors during an audit. So our focus is on maintaining balance, not building reserves. While the past 3 fiscal years, SFY 23 to SFY 25, ended with a modest surplus, with modest surpluses, SFY 22 was a notable outlier with a significant deficit. As of June 30, 2025, our net position is approximately $909,000, which reflects about a 4% change from SFY 24. Our aim is to keep the annual changes within a plus or minus 5% range, and this trend shows we're moving in the right direction. Continued stabilization of this metric remains an essential priority for us. Next slide, please. So looking ahead at SFY 26, several variables could affect our SFY 26 performance. The first is office space and lease negotiations. Any changes there, whether a move or a revised lease, could significantly affect our expenses. Excuse me. Second, changes in contract start dates and can affect both the revenue flow and spending. And third, recruitment and staffing changes. The timing of hires or vacancies influences our direct and overhead costs. We will continue to monitor these closely and adjust throughout the year to stay aligned with a balanced budget. And with that, I will turn it over to Silva for the SFY 26 Q1 update.
Thank you, Ral. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yes, moving on to an update on state fiscal year 26 through Q1, which includes the months of July, August, and September. Here we have a table that summarizes the quarter by month. Beginning with July, you'll notice that our expenses were higher than our revenue. Since July is the first month of the state fiscal year, that's when a majority of our annual payables come through, including agency-wide renewals, IT-related expenses, and other upfront expenses that support operations for the full year. This is typical. Usually in July, we see a higher overhead rate, but we balance it out throughout the year. As we look at August and September, you'll see a clear shift. Revenue increases significantly while expenses begin to normalize. The primary reason for this is that staff are heavily focused on completing project work during this period, especially with the MPO 3C contract ending in September. Overall, through Q1, we ended with a surplus of about $75,000. Looking at our overhead rate, we started the year at 131% in July due to those upfront payables. But as revenue increased in August and September, the overhead rate naturally trended downward. We closed the quarter at 111%. While this is lower than our approved overhead rate, the fiscal year is still in its early stages, so we expect the rate to rise and align with the approved overhead rate over the course of the year. Next slide, please. Thank you. Moving on to our revenue performance through Q1. This chart compares our projected revenue in blue, which as a reminder is a straight line projection, to our actual revenue in orange across each funding category. Beginning with MPO and MassDOT directed PL. As I mentioned earlier, this funding category runs on a federal fiscal year, meaning that this contract expires every September. Given that timeline, we projected $1.6 million and charged about $1.85 million, which puts us at 112% of our target. This variance is directly tied to the significant amount of project work completed ahead of the contract end date. In the SPR category, we projected $121,000 and charged about $106,000, reaching 88% of the Q1 target. This is expected and consistent with timing patterns in our SPR work. For MassDOT Other, we projected $6,000 and charged nearly $6,800, coming in at about 113% of the projection. This category includes our MassDOT on-call contract, which is approaching its closeout phase. So we expect activity in this line to taper off. In the MBTA category, we projected 122,000 and charged about 142,000, or 117% of the projection. With the MBTA category, we've been reporting higher than expected actuals throughout the state fiscal year 25 and now into state fiscal year 26, which shows strong engagement in our active MBTA projects and steady project activity. I also want to note that MBTA contracts operate on their own schedule. So they begin when work scopes are approved and a purchase order is sent. Their timing doesn't necessarily align with either the state or the federal fiscal year. This is normal for this category and simply reflects a different contract cycle when it comes to the MBTA projects. In the other category, we projected 153,000 and charged about 362,000. This variance reflects final consultant closeout invoices that came in as contracts came to a close. This includes consultants related to the MVP, MADI, and Vision Zero Action Plan grants. Overall, revenue performance through quarter one exceeded expectations at 120% of our projection. Again, the 2 million projection shown in this graph is based on a straight line projection, which is a planning tool that we use that assumes revenue will be earned evenly across all 4 quarters. But actual and historical data shows that revenue fluctuates depending on deliverables, consultant activity, and the start and end date of contracts. So much of the quarter one variance in projection versus actuals is due to staff prioritizing project work and completing deliverables ahead of contract end dates and closing out any consultant contracts. While we're at 120% of our projection, we anticipate this trend to level off as the year progresses. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now I'll walk through our expense performance for quarter one. This chart shows our projected expenses compared to our actuals across 3 main categories: admin expenses, direct labor, and direct costs. Starting with admin expenses, we came in at 91% of our projection. A few key initiatives reflected in this category in quarter one included project management training, as well as DEIA trainings and workshops offered across the agency. In the direct labor category, which includes staff salaries directly charged to contracts, we projected 830,000 and came in very close at 826,000. In the direct cost category, we projected 213,000 based on straight line projections and charged approximately 648,000. This variance is largely due to the timing of invoices, as I mentioned earlier, on the revenue side of things. For example, given that the MPO3C contract closed in September, we saw several consultant invoices come through in September as well. Some of these invoices were related to the deobligated funds, which included work for the FTA STOPS model and DEIA assessment, just to name a few. In total, while quarter one expenses came in at 116% of our projections, they remained aligned with our revenue, allowing us to end the quarter with a balanced budget. We will continue to monitor our operating budget closely as we move into quarter two. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you all for your time and attention, and we'll take any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you, Silva. Thank you, Haral. I think very impressive to end last fiscal year within a couple of percentage points of budget. That takes very careful management, and I applaud your efforts there. I think it was 35,000 on an $8.2 million budget. So very impressive to sort of land where you landed. And then with respect to quarter one, it's always a challenge to project forward based on one quarter's information, but once again, you're on the right track, and I'm very comfortable with your stewardship of the organization's funds. Does anybody have any questions for anybody on the team? Eric, go ahead, please.
No, I don't have any questions. I would just agree with Brian that this looks really good. And appreciate this update.
Yeah, you folks do great work, and it's often unsung and behind the scenes, but allow me to sing and bring you on stage. So, any other questions for anybody? I guess just on the topic of office space, I know we discuss this every meeting. I know it's a perennial challenge. Again, just want to encourage you to continue pushing. I think it's just important to have a lease, whether or not it's in 10 Park Plaza or not. I just think it's a very important just business process that we do need to sort of get to at some point. And if anybody on the committee can be helpful, I'm sure we will do that. Any other questions for anybody on the team? Okay, seeing none. That is, no, sorry, Tegan. You're going to informally talk about your goals.
Yes, I thank you. As Farrell mentioned, since we haven't met in a little while, we wanted to make sure we had a section. And I think actually the last meeting I was ill, so I apologize for that. And I just wanted to note that 2 memos have been posted to the materials for today's meeting. One of them is a closeout of the prior state fiscal year in terms of progress towards my goals. And the other one is kind of progress in the first 4-ish months of this state fiscal year. So roughly like the first quarter plus a little bit. But for those who don't know me, I'm Tegan Tyke. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Region MPO. I like to work with this committee throughout the year to kind of give updates as to progress towards the goals that I set in my reviews. And I welcome any casual discussion about the goals that I've set and the progress we've made. If anything more substantial comes up that we'd want to have a deeper discussion on, we can always defer that to a future meeting. So next slide, please. Okay, so that says quarterly updates, but again, I'm going to do a little bit of a dual purpose. I'm going to briefly touch on closing out state fiscal year 25 and also then talk a little bit more about the progress we've made in 2026, and there's been quite a bit so far. But just as a reminder, for the operations plan, I have my evaluation each year. This past year it was in May, sometimes it's in June. The point is to try to have that review before salary adjustments happen on July 1st, which is the beginning of the state fiscal year. And then also just as a reminder, as defined in the operations plan, my performance evaluation and review takes place with the designee for the chair of the MPO, the vice chair, and the chair of the MPO's A&F committee, which is, of course, Brian Kane from the MBTA Advisory Board here. In the MPO chair's designee spot, I review with David Muller, the executive director of the Office of Transportation Planning at Mass DOT. And I also did my review with the then executive director of MAPC, Mark Drayson, back in May. So next slide, please. So like the prior state fiscal year 2025, in 2026, in this review, I also organized my goals more or less in the categories of our agency's 5-year strategic plan. I've liked that structure because it kind of aligns with how we're trying to advance with that plan along with my own goals. But since we're in the 5th and final year of implementing that strategic plan, it's possible I would adjust this structure going forward at my next review. But that I'll think about a little bit further in the year. And then before I get into it, I just want to say that this year I tried to build on last year's goals without repeating everything that was still in progress, trying to be comprehensive but not overly specific. I also crafted those goals this year in the context of priority really being stabilizing and kind of creating a stable environment for staff to work, following such a significant change in the federal administration and the kind of continued change we're experiencing in terms of federal policy and funding around transportation. So the next couple of slides are going to be a table that shows very simply goals that were set last year compared to goals that were set this year. And while I go through it, I'll touch on most of the goals from last year were I would say accomplished within, I think, very good reason. And you can read about those in the memo. There's a few that are still in progress, and I'll touch on those as I go through and talk about the challenges that we saw. So next slide, please. So forgive me, the tables here, I think it's probably the simplest way to try to convey this information. But if we look at the goals in terms of the goal area, which is on the left side of the table on the slide, I list the state fiscal year 2025 goals that I set last year. Just a quick status statement of whether it was accomplished or still in progress. And then where there are similar comparable state fiscal year 2026 goals. So just to kind of quickly run through them. In the area of identity and awareness, last year I was really looking to expand the forums where we could speak about the MPO's work, and we highlight a couple of really, I think, exciting examples of that in the memo that I posted. And my goal for this year is to maintain a similar level of participation in professional development opportunities. I think that's really critical. We as an agency are able to do that, whereas I know it can be quite challenging to invest in this space right now with uncertainty, but we have been able to a lot of similar budget this year towards supporting professional development work. We also had a goal last year. I also had a goal last year. I keep saying we because really it's a lot of staff that works with me to achieve these goals. But what the goal I set was to identify the funding for and implement an identity and branding exercise. That one's labeled as in progress because we did, and I reported on this in the past as well, we had some challenges related to the capacity in this space. We did secure deobligated PL funding to carry out an identity and branding exercise, but really weren't able to pull it off in the kind of high quality way I would want to do with the capacity that we had, particularly over the last half of the last state fiscal year. So for this year, we'll continue to explore the feasibility of advancing the branding initiative, but really sort of more overall enhancing the agency's public presence. One of the things I'll talk about is that we've shifted a lot of our attention towards updating our website in the near term. So moving on to the programs and services area, my goals last year were really around implementing the first stage, the first time that we have been carrying out multi-year planning at the agency. So breaking away from our annual work planning that happens to feed into the UPWP, we decided to create a multi-year framework for about 13 different programmatic areas of the agency to work with, to really lay out the vision and goals over the next 3 to 5 years. And then that would tie in better with our long range goals. So that was in the context of working on sort of developing the multi-year plans and then aligning the UPWP process to really benefit from the work in the multi-year planning process. So I would say we kicked off a successful first year last year. And so my goals for this year in state fiscal year 2026 are to continue to refine those multi-year plans and think about how those then influence a sort of an agency-wide action plan that helps then also inform both the UPWP, but also the long-range transportation plan development. And also I added in a new goal in this area, which is around really focusing on this concept of having a solid pipeline of our planning work through to project and construction funding, primarily through our technical assistance and planning work. Next slide, please. In the area of governance, last year I wanted to focus on embedding the operations plan into our ongoing agency work, which I feel like was successful. And then also expand sort of the ways in which we're engaging board members in learning activities, learning opportunities. So we succeeded in some ways, but I would say it's in progress. I had a goal last year to engage some of the board members in the annual meeting for AMPO last year, and we weren't successful in securing kind of deobligated funding to be able to support that. So I want to continue to think about that and explore other ways that we can make sure that board members are really engaged with staff work as a whole. Within organizational structure and staffing, our goal last year was to do kind of a major refresh of the compensation plan, which we did start and are in progress with. We are taking a bit of a kind of a longer stretch of time than we originally planned because we're now going through an entire update process of all of the job descriptions at the agency to better inform that compensation plan refresh. So that is in progress, as is continuing with the goal of moving or renovating the existing office. Brian, you just spoke to that. I don't include it as an explicit goal this year, but it is something we're continuing to work toward, and I'm happy to talk about it. In the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, last year I had a goal to fund a really significant DEI initiative that was identified by our DEIA working group within the staff, which is now called the Ideas Committee. Thanks, committee instead of working group, my apologies. And we did do that. And so this year we're looking to continue to support that working group in identifying how we can make improvements, particularly in our staff recruitment and onboarding at the agency. Next slide, please. And then lastly, in funding and operations, as Brian recognized, thank you. We've been working very hard to operate with neither a significant deficit or surplus, so within the range of 0 to 5%. We'll continue to work towards that this year. Last year, we had goals to bring in at least one new revenue source. We were more successful than that. We brought in several new discretionary grant revenue sources. We are still working on completing and signing a fiduciary agent agreement. There was a significant, obviously, change in leadership at MAPC last year. And so now we're working with the new permanent executive director, Lizzie Wayant, to keep this moving and to get it towards something that we can bring to the board. And then we also built a lot of new partnerships with different agencies last year, and that's also detailed in the memo I posted. This year, as I mentioned, my focus is more around maintaining stability for the existing staff in the context of the uncertainty that we've been facing with the new administration. So with that, I'd like to move into highlighting some of the things we've done in roughly the last 4 months, July through October. Next slide. And frankly, I have quite a bit to report on, so forgive me some time to kind of celebrate how much has really been done in these last 4 months towards accomplishing these goals. And again, a lot of this is in the memo, so I'll touch on it at a really high level, and then I'm happy to answer questions about it. So on each of these slides, you'll see the header in terms of the goal area at the top. It says identity and awareness, for example, on this slide, and then below that, professional development opportunities is a shorthand for the goals that I set in this area. So first of all, I have talked about the various professional development opportunities that we've had as staff as ways to elevate the MPO's work quite a bit in executive director reports at board meetings, and then also in the memo. So I won't describe them here, but I just want to highlight how much has really happened. A lot of this was in September. It's kind of a big month for these kinds of opportunities, but they ranged from invitation-only events that I was able to participate in, such as the MPO and State DOT Leadership Peer Exchange that was sponsored by AASHTO, a newly formatted Shared Use Mobility Center Summit focused on bringing together change agents from different metro areas. Then we were also this year able to send more attendees than ever to the AMPO annual conference because it was in Providence, Rhode Island. So that presented really excellent opportunities for us. We had a staff attend the International Association for Public Participation annual conference. And we, as usual, sent a significant number of staff to the Mass Not Moving Together conference, which props to Mass DOT was a really excellent engagement this year. Next slide, please. So in the area of enhancing our public presence, the work that we've done in this first quarter has been substantial. We spent quite a bit of time working with a consultant to update not only our external facing website, but our internal intranet. And we are working towards launching that website this winter, perhaps in the new calendar year. In addition, just to highlight some other activities that have been going on behind the scenes, our communications, graphics, and editorial staff have been doing a lot of collaborating together to come up with kind of a new practice that we have of creating these visual identity packages for larger planning initiatives so we can be consistent across multiple forums in terms of how we're talking about these initiatives or showing these initiatives. They've also been working to update the accessibility practices for our publications and then developing for standards for how we develop some of the different products we develop through our project work, like white papers, briefs, and memos. Next slide, please. In the area of programs and services, I talked about, wanting to advance our multi-year plans, working towards a draft overall agency action plan. So we actually spent quite a significant amount of time as a leadership team since our retreat in the summer, meeting almost weekly to workshop how we want to engage in this second year of updating multi-year plans. So we did a lot of work. We've set up a structure. We've kicked it off with staff. We're all working on updating the 13 existing multi-year plans, which represents most, but certainly not all of the work at the agency. But in addition, something I talk about in the memo is that we've worked to plan a few different pilots, ways that we can kind of pilot new forms of collaboration across multi-year plans and work at the agency. So we're looking forward to implementing those in the coming quarter or two. Next slide, please. And we're also putting a lot of work and attention into kind of creating this pipeline between our planning to actual project funding and construction. And that's happening in two primary areas right now. One is that 2 of our discretionary grants are now moving into second phases where we will be going from the planning and understanding the problems to designing and implementing quick build projects to help mitigate both heat effects on people walking and biking, as well as improve safety in our region through our Vision Zero work. We've also been working heavily with the Transportation Improvement Program Committee and the board to develop policies for rescoring all of the projects so that they'll be rescored on the same framework and development milestones to make sure that the projects are actually advancing towards construction. Next slide, please. In the area of governance, so I've been trying to work with the existing forums that we have to sort of improve board engagement in all of the staff's work. I welcome feedback on any of these. Absolutely, please share that feedback with me. I've been trying to use the executive director's reports as a way to really describe and engage in the work that might often be a bit more behind the scenes. I hope that folks are benefiting from those. If not, please let me know what I might be able to do better. And I always welcome questions in those executive directors' reports at board meetings. So please always feel free to raise your hand and ask for more information. I also already mentioned work with the TIP committee. We're also working with the UPWP committee by kind of structuring our work with them differently this year. Adding in more conversation about programmatic work going on at the agency, and also this year bringing in MAPC to talk about some of the work that they've been doing that's funded through the MPO's PL funding as well. And then if we're in the area of governments, I would be remiss if I did not mention that the launch of the Community Advisory Council in September represents a significant sort of not necessarily change in governments, but an effect on the governance structure of the MPO in the sense that we've really recreated that body in a way that brings forward the less heard voices and gives them direct influence into the MPO's planning processes. So I've talked a lot about that already. I won't now, but I think that represents a really amazing governance evolution and improvement. Next slide, please. Only a few more. Organizational structure and staffing. I already talked about the compensation plan, just that we have extended that work that's going on to include a full agency-wide update on job descriptions. And then even though this wasn't part of my goal, I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention a few recruitment updates this first quarter. Haral mentioned how last year we had more recruitments than resignations, and we really built up the level of our staff to the point, I think one of the highest points since the pandemic hit. We also managed to recruit in this first quarter 2 new management team members. Those are vacancies that we've had for a little while that we've worked really hard to fill. And for the first time in a while, we have a fully staffed management team group or level at the agency. So that is huge and wonderful and impactful. We've also in this first quarter brought on another senior planner into the transportation space. But what I will say is that this quarter, we've already seen 3 announcements of retirements. They weren't surprises, but they're still very impactful, but also 5 additional resignations. So we will be working pretty hard in the coming quarter or 2 on recruitment, and that takes a lot of time and energy to sort of fill those vacancies that we will have. And we are planning to fill those vacancies and have the budget to do so. Next slide, please. Tons has been going on in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space, which I want to really highlight because I know folks are concerned about kind of losing focus on some of those efforts in the current administration. Over the last 4 months, we've seen the IDEAS group, our DEIA working group, formalize themselves through establishing a charter, and they've been engaged in a kind of a new role or a more like intensive role in working directly with not only leadership team members, but also the DEIA consultant that we brought on board to support drafting the first organization-wide DEIA action plan. So what we'll do is we'll work with the IDEAS group, but also staff across the agency to kick off the action plan quite soon and develop a roadmap for how we can implement the recommendations that are in it. And then also we did carry out over the last 4 months, I believe it was in August, a full afternoon training with all staff related to this DEIA space called Understanding Social Identity. Next slide. So the last slide, in funding and operations, we continue, as has been shown, to operate with an average of a deficit or surplus within that 0 to 5% tolerance level. And again, in terms of maintaining stability for existing staff in this current climate, we are also working really hard we've had a couple of grants awarded that we've spent a lot of time over the last few months working with our federal partners to try to get under full contract. So that's been the focus of the last several months, and we'll continue to sort of work with our federal partners to try to make sure that we have those funding streams that we have planned for as consistent and reliable as possible. And with that, thanks for listening to me go through that. Brian, if anybody would like to talk about any of those goals or ask questions, happy to have a conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Tegan. Lot there, and kudos to you for the comprehensiveness. I have a few notes here that I just want to bring up, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the committee for informal discussion. So it's hard to believe we're at the end of the 5-year strategic plan. I feel like we just started that last month in some ways. So I would like to talk about at some point the next 5-year plan and how you want to sort of engage this committee and the rest of the board in doing that. Related to that, and I think there was a little bit of it in your remarks and in your memo about multi-year plan reviews. I do want to encourage, however possible, and I'm not really sure how this works or how we could do this, but I would love at some point for someone to go back and look at old plans, multi-year plans, strategic plans, planning documents, PMTs, whatever it is, and sort of see what was successful, what was predicted successfully, and kind of what made those things successful and what made other predictions or plans or ideas or concepts less successful, as a way to sort of learn how to replicate success. We need in this Commonwealth, in this region, in this nation to do transportation projects quicker, better, faster, more efficiently. And I think this is an important place where we could try to learn and institute some best practice, and maybe in many ways lead the nation in this stuff. I mentioned the lease in Haral's comments, and I'll just bring that up again. And related to that, it's really important, in my opinion, to have written agreements readily available to be reviewed wherever possible. And especially for a public entity, having those records is just really important. Sorry, can we bring down the discussions question slide and just make this a little bigger? Possibly. Thank you. I just thank you. I think it's important for the agency and any public agency, and I feel the same way about my agency, to have any sort of agreement available. So I would just continue to encourage you to try to bring to light the MARPA formula, the fiduciary agreement between MAPC and us, I know has been in discussion. And again, I think that needs some light shed on it. And any sort of other agreements that CTPS has with MassDOT or with any of the other member entities. I think we just need to, again, not rely on history and the way we've always done it, but bring those to light and let's get those as readily available as possible. I continue to support your branding initiative. I think it's really smart and something that needs to be continued, along with professional development. Recruitment and retention is obviously the core issue. CTPS is its people, and your ability to bring folks in and keep them here is great and deserves kudos. It's not easy in this environment. It's not easy in the public sector these days, and I think you've done a great job bringing folks in. And having a fully staffed management team, I think it's the first that I can remember in a long time. So awesome, and that will begin to show results, I think, very quickly. So those are my brief comments on this. I don't know, Eric or Derek, if anybody else has anything, Dennis, they wanted to bring up.
I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think that I appreciate your comments, Brian. Tegan, I thought that was a really great overview. I appreciate how you've kind of highlighted, accomplishments and things that are still, in progress. And yeah, no, it's just good to see all this.
I'll echo your sentiment, Brian, about doing a look back of the previous year's plans on what successes there have been and how we can replicate those or lessons learned. So,
Yeah, if I can respond to that a little bit, I also completely agree. That's a pretty massive undertaking, depending on how kind of define that look back. One thing that we have started to do and should be able to report some progress on. We were working with somebody who was with us, but then actually resigned recently, and so we're trying to maintain the continuity of the work. But we've looked back at the various plans and studies that we have done as the MPO, as CTPS, to work to bring together sort of the various findings and make it a more cohesive body of work to be able to better sort of package what we do and define what we do next. That in and of itself is a really big exercise given how much work and research and study we put out there. But that's a starting point that we have dipped our toes into and really should always be doing. But I think once you have a solid start, you can keep building on that. But to look across, the various agencies and the plans and like what's worked and what hasn't, I think that's a pretty powerful thing to think about. Is there a way to initiate kind of a cross-agency kind of collaboration to really think through like what is effective and working towards our goals, even if our goals are slightly different,
Mhm.
they still align pretty well across our various agencies that you mentioned in our state, which is a benefit we have compared to some other states. And so it's great to think about that. So I think we'll think about that some more. I think that
Yeah,
would be really
ruminate on
interesting.
that. I know it's a big ask and it's a big scope and that has to get refined and narrowed down, but I do think it would be a powerful tool or a powerful set of findings if we could ever get there. So, Dennis, I
Yeah.
see your hand, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to echo your comments. I think they're right on, especially about the work that Tegan's doing. So impressive. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I do have one comment unrelated to our committee, but at the end of the meeting, I'd just like to I have a question for Tegan if I could.
Why don't you go ahead now, Dennis? We're
Okay,
being very
great.
informal today.
Tegan, I know we don't have another MPO meeting before that December 2nd meeting that you sent a memo out. I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that meeting and what the agenda would be and the roles of the various people, just to be some clarification, that's all.
Yeah, let me bear with me 1 second while I pull up a refresher, unless Annette, you have it at top of mind. Because my focus has largely been on the annual meeting, which
Yeah.
is December 11th.
Yep.
So let me bring up our summary. So I think we are holding both typically scheduled meetings in December because we have some time sensitivities in terms of posting or getting amendments kind of in process. So if I pull up this very tiny spreadsheet. So our focus on, I think it's December 4th is the first one. We'll be coming up with a work scope around doing some
No, that's regarding the December 2nd meeting was the one, the MAPC MPO meeting, that one there.
Oh, I'm
That's the one.
sorry.
That's okay. No,
Yeah. No, that one's really exciting. So just a little bit of context. This is something that we're piloting as a new way to kind of partner with the sub-regional coordinators and the work that they do through the MAPC sub-regional work. We found it kind of tricky at times to really embed the MPO topics into like kind of the individual sub-regional meetings because the folks who attend those sub-regional meetings might have different interests, not necessarily as focused on transportation or otherwise. So what we're trying to do is host a combined all the subregions together in a larger virtual MPO transportation needs sort of focused uh, workshop essentially, where we'll talk a little bit about the MPO, but we'll actually have sub-regional breakouts to talk about the different challenges and needs that that the subregions are seeing, and then come back together and report out on it. So sub-regional reps like you, Dennis, we're asking to work with you to help us sort of be a leader and a little bit of a facilitator with your sub-regional breakout group. Staff will, of course, be doing that as well and kind of help shepherd that conversation. And we're hoping it draws a better link and understanding. Some of the sub-regional reps are really closely working with their sub-regional groups. Others are a little bit more, separated from them because of the different, again, interests that can be sometimes talked about in those groups. So it'll elevate the MPO sub-regional rep with the sub-regional members, and also help empower, I hope, the sub-regional reps to bring those concerns and questions back to the MPO space. I feel like that's a very high level. If you want to talk about specific roles, you
No,
should
perfect.
absolutely.
No, that's a perfect clarification. That's what I thought it was, but I just wanted to make sure that that was the intent and the agenda for the meeting. That's great. So I look
Yeah.
forward to that. Actually, I think it's a great idea to have that meeting.
Thanks. Maybe that's something I also should have celebrated in there, but it's a really good way of partnership with them. MEPC is evolving. And again, we're trying to engage board members in a way where you really feel empowered to represent the group that you're supposed to be representing, right? Trying to make it easier for you and elevate that ability to be representative.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And when you get everybody together, you can have a magic trick. It'll be great.
Magic trick.
Perhaps involving a swap, but who knows? Sorry, dad.
You got to be an insider to get that joke, Ryan. Jeez. I feel like it took Derek a second.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm stopped now. Yeah, Tegan, great job as always. Please keep it up. And again, we will be happy to support you in any way that we can. I think I speak for the committee when I say that. Anybody have any final issues, questions, comments, concerns?
If I can just add one
Sure.
last thank you to you all too. I know it takes time to come to these meetings and to listen and to read the memos and listen to this work, but I think it's so important because otherwise so much of the great work that staff does goes a little under the radar, and it's not clear how much is going on behind the scenes to really evolve and improve the work of the MPO. So I just want to also express my appreciation, since most of this, I can't do any of this without the staff. As you said, Brian, CTPS, the MPO is the people who work for it.
Here,
And so
here.
I appreciate your time.
So this was not an official meeting. I will leave it to you guys to figure out how to get the notes. I don't think we'll have minutes, but we might have notes that we can
We'll work
share.
on that. Yeah.
But again, I will leave that in your far more capable hands. With that, I guess we don't need a motion to adjourn since we're not actually meeting. But thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. And we'll talk to you all real soon. See you in December.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving.